The new look Cowboys defense looked pretty good on Monday Night Football. We'll tell you why it was such a big improvement next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are now the #1 sports podcast network, and today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. He is Landon McCool, and on today's show, we are reviewing the Cowboys' Monday Night Football win over the Las Vegas Raiders. We're going to talk about some notes that we saw from the Cowboys offensive line. We'll talk about their two new cornerbacks, Caelen, Carson, not really new, but new to the starting lineup, and Savon, Ravel. But I thought we should first start 10,000-foot view on this Cowboys defense. It looks so different compared to what we saw like in week 1 and week 2, not only the personnel, but also how Matt Eberflus is using a lot of these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you could tell that the defensive game caller had more confidence in the players that were being deployed, right? And that was a bigger part of this, and that there was a lot more key timed blitzes, like a lot more trusting the guys to kind of line up in the face of their receivers. Just like if you were kind of examining somebody's body language, right, and seeing how comfortable they are, and if they're kind of standing in the corner and like talking to themselves and looking down on the floor versus chin up, speaking confidently and looking people in the eyes, you notice a difference. And I think that's the equivalent of what we saw from the play caller, is a guy who felt good about the tools he was using, knew what he was trying to accomplish. And look, we're going to talk about this throughout this podcast. Obviously, the context of who they played is a part of that, but it's not all of it, right? They came into that game feeling like they were going to do something, and they had a plan that they felt like was going to work, and that they had improved the personnel. And you could see that in the way they called the game plan.
Yeah, and it was different. It just looked so much more aggressive rather than being passive like they were the first 2 months of the season. And again, maybe the Raiders played a big part of that, but there was a level of confidence, as you mentioned, from this unit. And one of the things, and one of the reasons why we were excited about the Quinnen Williams trade, outside of just getting Quinnen Williams, he's obviously a superstar, is that you felt like he could be a force multiplier for this team, where the players around him could start to, maybe reach their potential. And I think the best example of that is Osa Odighizuwa, who has had a okay season. I think he's been a little bit up and down. In the first game with Quinnen Williams, he has a career high 8 pressures. Looks like the best player that we've seen him, the best version of him we've seen so far. And I think the hope is that you have this awesome player in Quinnen Williams, and he can kind of bring up Osa Odighizuwa as well.
Well, and I think that applies across the board too, right? We'll talk a little bit about the cornerbacks later, but I think with Logan Wilson and DeMarvion Overshown, it's not that they came in there and played as fantastic as Quinnen Williams, but the fact that you had those guys out there and they were part of a heavy rotation, and it limited the exposure that you had to some of the more problematic elements of your linebacker core. So yeah, I think it's not only just the improved talent that you've got, it's the fact that those improved talent are keeping the kind of common perpetrators, the guys that you see like are constantly the ones that are making the mistakes. They're still playing, but they're not playing 40 snaps anymore. They've been pulled back to 10 to 15, which in some cases solved a lot of ills for those guys, right? Like they for Kenneth Murray, it felt like that was an appropriate amount of snaps before you felt like you were overexposing him. For Sam Williams, he still saw the same kind of knuckleheaded stuff on bootlegs and an inability to kind of keep contained at times. But you did see him kind of, get in there and be able to limit the amount of downside that you're exposing yourself to while still getting a guy that is an athlete who can get upfield and can pressure the quarterback. So yeah, I think it's twofold. It's the increased talent, obviously, but it's also just being able to be a little more selective with some key guys on your team that can be a little bit high variance.
Brian Schottenheimer promised that there was going to be changes coming out of the bye week. And one of the changes is James Houston was basically a full-time starter. This was somebody who was getting, like 12 to 15 snaps a game before the bye week. 28 snaps in this game. He had more than Dante Fowler. Dante Fowler had just 11 snaps. He had more than Sam Williams, who had 26 snaps. He had more than Jadeveon Clowney, who played quite a few snaps in this game as well. But it feels like your top three defensive ends in terms of snaps, at least in this game and maybe moving forward, are Donovan Ezeraku, who played 32 snaps, Jadeveon Clowney, and James Houston, and then the other guys are just going to rotate it.
Yeah, I mean, we may want to be a little bit careful here just because of the timing of the season where we are. We're right before the group of where you're about to play 3 games in, what is it, 17 days or something like that?
4 games in 18 days.
That's what it was, 4 games in 18 days. So I do think
that game script.
And game script obviously has a huge part of it. So, but I do think you're right that they're certainly treating Houston like a guy that they're prioritizing getting onto the field. He's not just relief. He's a guy that they're, trying to get him on there, trying to get him rushing the passer to take advantage of that. I think specifically when it comes to a guy like Fowler, who only played 13, I think it's 13 or 14
11
snaps.
11 snaps.
Yeah, I think they were specifically trying to keep him fresh because they that they need him throughout the next few weeks. But you're right. Like I do think that just like we talked about, their stance, the way that they were handling Houston, they were trying to get him on the field for key downs, and he rewarded them with a really good game.
All right, let's talk about the defensive tackles, because we saw an uptick in the number of defensive tackles on the field. We can go through the snap counts if you want. Quinnen Williams, 33. Osa Odighizuwa, 40. Kenny Clark was at 38 snaps. Jay Toia was at 13 snaps. No Solomon Thomas in this game as he deals with a calf injury. We should mention Perion Winfrey. He was added to the active roster on Tuesday. We'll see if he plays against the Eagles on Sunday. But it seems like Matt Eberflus is opening up this defense, and we're going to see more defensive tackle looks over the next 2 months.
Yeah, they dropped Simone Clark, so that's one less linebacker just numbers-wise that they have. And added another defensive tackle. And if you look at where the talent is stacked right now, I mean, it's all a defensive tackle. We're in the upside down now, Marcus. I don't know what's going on. It does look like the plan is to lean into this a little bit. And I think that, we saw a kind of normalization of the usage of 3 defensive tackles, maybe a little bit down from what we saw last week when they were getting ready. But I think, again, that probably was because of game script, right? But it's still at somewhere Marcus and I did a nice little exercise before the show, trying to figure out exactly around what the percentage was. And we came up with about 15% of the plays we saw at least 3 defensive tackles on the field. And I think what you saw is that they moved Osa around a little bit, right? You saw him lining up a little bit as a defensive end. I think it was somewhere in the area of 20 snaps at defensive at a 5 tech, let's call it that kind of defensive end. And I think that's the way you kind of handle this, right? You have your normal allotted 2 defensive tackle snaps where you're going to heavily rotate those 3 guys. You're going to have a couple of extra possessions or a series where you're going to play 3 defensive tackles, but all 3 of those guys are going to get plenty of opportunity to get lots of snaps, and they're not going to be wanting for anything, as we saw on Monday night.
And maybe it's just going to be matchup dependent. Like you play Philadelphia this week. I think the best way to beat Jalen Hurts is to keep him in the pocket and try to squeeze the pocket. So maybe we see more of those 3 defensive tackle looks, because guys like Solomon Thomas and Osa Odighizuwa are like 280 pounds. They can play on the edge because they've got enough quickness. Maybe we see more of those looks and, just rotating these guys in to keep them fresh. So an interesting wrinkle for Matt Eberflus. We'll see if it continues. Let's talk about the Cowboys' new cornerbacks, because Savon, Ravel, and Caelen Carson played a whole lot of snaps on Monday Night Football. We'll tell you how those guys performed next.
Today's show is brought to you by our friends over there at Peloton. Look, folks, it's time to break through the busiest time of the year with a brand new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus that's powered by Peloton IQ. It's Peloton's most elevated technology and equipment yet that gives you real-time guidance, and it gives you endless ways to move, whether you want to work out by yourself or if you want to work out with your favorite instructor, like my personal favorite, Alex Toussaint. He always gets me fired up to tackle the day. And the thing I like about Peloton, it helps me achieve more in less times. They have features that help you plan, stay motivated, track your progress, and Peloton IQ also provides personalized workout plans and recommendations. That's something that I use right now during the busiest time of the year covering the NFL. They plan my workouts for me based on my mood, my vibe, and also my favorite instructors. So make sure you check it out and use it, because it also helps you correct your form in real time, and it maximizes your reps. It counts your reps so that you can do it smarter, safer, and more efficient. Let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL podcast. 2 shows every single day. 1 in the morning with Tyler Rowland, 1 in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins. Available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Lane, let's talk about the Cowboys cornerbacks, because, man, it's so different compared to what we saw earlier in the year. Week 1 against Philadelphia, Caelen played 100% of the defensive snaps. Trayvon Diggs played a good percentage of that. DaRon Bland played in the slot, and those were your 3 corners. This week, Caelen was active but did not play a single snap on defense. Instead, it was Carson who played every snap for the Cowboys on the outside. You had DaRon Bland as one of your starting cornerbacks. Savon Ravel rotated in and played 19 snaps. You still had Reddy Stewart. Bridges did not play at all. He was a healthy scratch. How do you think Carson and Ravel played in this one?
Well, let me just start with the fact that I think that what Caelen Carson did on Monday night was the most impressive feat of all the guys that were coming back and or additions, except for Quinnen Williams, right? Like, I mean, for him to go from not playing to playing, I think it was like only 15 snaps or 20 snaps in week 9, right? Yeah. To 60 snaps, like, and being the full-time starter and playing good and playing absolutely fine. Like, some of the best football we've seen him play. He had a pass breakup in the end zone. And I went back and watched the tape, and he was where he was supposed to be. There was a time when he was running a crosser and his guy got caught up, and he was ahead of the spot, knew exactly where he was supposed to be. I just felt like he's just playing with a level of confidence that we haven't seen since his rookie season, early on in training camp, and then early in the regular season. And I think if you can get him, and then we talked about Ravel, who I think at first looked a little bit nervous, right? Just had some kind of
for sure.
Well, I would call it just more like he was like on his toes and just like bouncing around and like nervous energy, right? And then definitely settled down, but he looks comfortable, sitting down and pressing. It looks comfortable operating in zone and operating in space. He's got it for sure. It's just a matter of kind of getting him up to speed and getting him used to the speed of the NFL. But yeah, to go out there and see Carson to play 60 snaps like that was just not what I expected, especially after all the heavy rotation we see from everyone else. I think it's everything to do with the way he's playing football right now.
Are you surprised that Elam didn't get any snaps in this game?
No, because I think, if you had seen these guys kind of struggle a little bit more, I think you probably, what you've got in Elam at this point, right? Like, so there's no like investigation or kind of development that you're trying to get done there. I think you had some questions about what you saw in Caelen Carson after a good performance in week 9 and getting him into some snaps. And I think once he was out there and he just kind of continued to play well, they let him continue to play out. I mean, he started, so they clearly had a plan for him to play a lot of snaps. And I think, he just continued to play well, so they kept him out there.
Well, and I think everything that the Cowboys are doing is with an eye towards 2026, right?
Yeah.
Carson's under contract. Savon Ravel's under contract. DaRon Bland is under contract. Kyrie Elam is not. And I think Elam has had plenty of opportunities to show whether he's going to be the guy. He's played almost 500 snaps. He only played 350 last year for Buffalo, 210 the year before that. We kind of just know what he is at this point, and it's a below average starting cornerback. Maybe he can be a good reserve, and you don't really need him right now because you've got some guys back. You've got Reddy Stewart, who you like in the slot.
Yeah.
I think this is probably just what it's going to be for Elam the rest of the season. What about Ravel, though? Like, what's the right way for the Cowboys to develop him this season? Because, again, he played 19 snaps on Monday night. Do you try to make him a full-time starter? Do you keep upping the snaps? Do you rotate him in? What would you like to see Dallas do here?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's going to be a pretty serious step up from the Raiders to the Eagles, right, next week. So I think that they just have to be careful with him, and just I think they have been careful with him, and maybe that's with the idea of, hey, when you're back, right? Like, and let's and they've done the ramping that they need to do for him as a rookie who's never played in the NFL before, who played at ECU last year. But I wouldn't be shocked if next week he played 30 snaps, 35 snaps, as opposed to I think what would you say he played 20 or something like that?
19 snaps, what's going to be hard is Philadelphia just doesn't use a lot of 3 receiver sets. So maybe you just are using fewer and fewer corners, and maybe it's just Caelen, Carson, and Bland in a lot of these situations. At the same time, you've got so many games coming up in a short amount of time. Maybe the strategy is just to rotate him and keep him at that like 15 to 20 snap mark. So that way you're just not putting a bunch of miles on his body in 2 weeks.
Well, I'll tell you this much. I think the big difference that you can see physically in this defense with the corner position is physicality, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think you see it with Caelen, Carson, who's absolutely not afraid to throw his body around and make tackles. I think Ravel, from what I saw on tape, certainly doesn't have any problem with that and is a bigger guy. So, again, in a week when the run game and tackling is going to be important against Saquon Barkley and the tight ends in Philadelphia, I think you may see him kind of come in here and
might have to
playing. Yeah, because again, it's a difficult assignment. Obviously, whenever you're talking about playing AJ Brown on a rookie or Smith, honestly, I mean, either one of those guys, like, you don't want to have facing the rookie for completely opposite reasons. But I think he's got to go out there. He's going to face them 2 times a year for the rest of his career, hopefully. And so you need to kind of throw him into the water at this point and just see if he can swim.
I've got one more note on the defensive backs before we move on. I want to talk about the offensive line, but Malik Hooker and Donovan Wilson being back. I know those guys have both had down years compared to what we're used to seeing, but it just goes to show how big the difference in the NFL can be from an average starter to some of the bottom of the roster guys and guys that you pick up off the practice squad. The back end was just so much more sound. You didn't have big coverage breaks. You had guys that were driving on the football, making plays, and even Marquise Bell. He had the interception, but there's a bit, and I like Marquise Bell a lot. There's a big drop off between Donovan Wilson and Marquise Bell. And it's something just to kind of remember going into the next year's draft cycle, because I'm just thinking, like, I don't even love drafting safeties in round 1. But getting a safety, getting like an above average safety when you've had awful safety play all year long can really solve a lot of issues.
Yeah, absolutely it can. I don't understand this weird thing that's going on, this Cold War that's going on between NFL ownership and all NFL safeties, apparently.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I agree. Like, the way the defensive back end looked, especially with Hooker. I mean, he just, like, it just brings a level of competency in the back end.
There's a grown up back there, which is
nice, exactly, right. And I just think when Hooker's not right, and the Cowboys have been really, really lucky that they've gotten a long stretch of healthy Malik Hooker. The Colts certainly didn't get very much of that when he was there. And so now that he's getting a little banged up every once in a while, we're seeing it. The play degrades a little bit, but he's coming back a little bit healthier, and you saw that, and you're reminded this is why we have him on the field. And Wilson, still a high variance player, probably becoming more high variance through the years. But yeah, just at least knowing what to do and usually making pretty solid tackles when he arrives.
All right, Landon, let's talk about some other notes that we saw after watching the All 22, including an impressive performance by Tyler Guyton. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's not a better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or you just want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score the next bucket to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late game push. And one of the things that I love is, we've got football all weekend, but now we've got the NBA all week long. It gives you something to bet on every single day. And they've got a fantastic offer for new customers. FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head over to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us the #1 sports podcast network. Elena, let's dive into some other notes from this game. And I want to go to the offensive line. It's been a while since we've had a really good Tyler Guyton game, but this might have been the best game that he's played as a pro.
Yeah, I think, finally just healthy, probably feeling good after for the first time in a long time. Had a rush back to make it back to the regular season. And obviously didn't quite make it all the way back. And then, just thrown into the fire and just kind of not feeling good. And I think he was battling through it for a long periods of the season, but I think it was good for him, because he played decently. He's definitely playing his best football. You're still continuing to see a progression. It sort of flattened a little bit after the injury, but I think he's come out of it, and you're seeing, look, it's not always the cleanest technique, but it's not always going to be the cleanest technique. No. And the point is that he understands the point. He knows what he's doing. They're using him as the lead blocker, the tip of the spear on some of these runs, and he's able to get onto his guy, seal him off, and completely wall off the defender on his side. So I just think that as time has gone on, he's learning more and more how to use the tools at his disposal to improvise, which is a big part of what you have to do when you're an offensive tackle facing some of the best athletes in the world. And I think he's doing a good job of, taking advantage of every opportunity, whether it's making sure that the guy is all the way down on the ground on a run play, or making sure that you go all the way down on the ground when you get punched in the face and the ref's looking at you. I think, he's doing all the little stuff that you need to kind of win the ball game.
And I think he's progressed over the last month or so. I mean, at least compared to early in the season. Yeah. If you just look at the raw numbers from Pro Football Focus, 3 QB hits allowed since week 5. I know he's missed some time in there, but he's just settling down. He still has his flaws, but you're starting to see him turn the corner as a pass blocker. It's going to be a real challenge this week against the Eagles with Nolan Smith and Jalen Phillips. But I thought this was an encouraging game from Tyler Guyton. A couple of other just random notes. Brevyn Spann-Ford continues to be a monster as a run blocker. I mean, he's a real weapon. I don't know why Luke Schoonmaker continues to outsnap him. I would love to see Dallas just lean into Brevyn Spann-Ford more. It seems like we're getting it in spurts. I wish it was a more long-term thing.
Yeah, I don't really know what the holdup is with kind of unleashing him a little bit more, but they really need to. I mean, obviously, as a run blocker, he's been absolutely dominant. Just just highlights every week of just him punishing linebackers and safeties specifically. So, yeah, definitely, it's just a guy who just needs to play more snaps. And I think, they like Schoonmaker. They're trying to make it work with Schoonmaker. I just, I think it's tough when the only time I'm noticing him is because you're asking him to make a backside cutoff on the second best, third best defensive end in the NFL. It's like,
well, I just rather have Spann-Ford trying to make that block. If we're gonna do that, just put Spann-Ford in there. I mean, neither of those guys are real receiving threats. Just give me the guy that's the better blocker. Another quick takeaway, if we're going to be on the negative side, kind of done with Cavante Turpin as a receiver. Not that they shouldn't ever throw to him, but it just feels like he hasn't developed the way that we were hoping that he would as a receiver. You don't really need him that much anymore because of Pickens, and you've got these tight ends that you can use. I think I'd rather just give all those snaps, like the true receiving snaps, to Flournoy, keep Turpin in his role as a jet sweep guy, and just move on.
Yeah, I think they mostly are doing it too, right? Like Flournoy's basically become wide receiver 3 and taking the job from anybody else. So, I think Turpin's only getting a couple of these snaps now, but he's not taking advantage of those either. So, needs to do a better job. Can I talk about a couple things that annoy me, honestly? Because
go ahead.
We're talking about. I mean, if we're gonna be negative, this is not so much a negative, but I just see it week to week, and I saw it with the Cowboys when I was watching tape today. I hate it when offensive linemen don't punish jumpers. Like when a defensive lineman jumps up in the air and try to knock down the ball, you should be knocking the defensive lineman down onto the ground, like every single time. And the only way you're going to ever prevent people from doing it is to punish them for doing it. And I think it's legal way of really, really hitting one of those guys really, really hard when they're in a compromised position. So you should do it. And then the other thing I want to throw out, this isn't necessarily a negative so much, but I think the Cowboys have done a really good job with the way they've used Tyler Smith this season. I don't not necessarily think that has been his best season, but the way that they've used him specifically and as a puller and as a kick out blocker on the edge in protection, they continue to do it and it continues to work, right? And it really, really worked well in a couple different cases with Crosby. I love that they're able to take advantage of the fact that Smith's a good tackle and let him play on the edge a little bit every once in a while. What a great key advantage for the Cowboys.
All right, that is it for today's show. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter @McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus _Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.